let's start. I think we'll start from back in the beginning. Let's start back to the beginning. Let's start in your childhood. And this way, people can really get a full sense of where you came from and how you made it to where you are today. So tell us about that beginning in your childhood.
Well, my story really starts when my biological father took me
Mm-hmm.
from my biological mother. We'll say kidnap. He kidnapped me. And
Wow.
he literally dumped me on the doorstep of his side chick. And she became my surrogate mother. So that was
Wow.
sort of how life started. Welcome to the
How
world
old
at about
were you? A baby at this point?
18 months to about 2 years old. Because remember, I don't have any memory of this. This
Right.
is what I literally
Been
received
told.
3 different versions of the story.
Uh-huh.
So I had to sort of piece together what I believe happened.
Right. Right. Of course.
And
Wow.
the common thread is that I was about 18 months to 2 years old when this happened.
Wow. And so were you treated all right by your surrogate mom? Like where
Yes, actually, I have to say that from the time I was 2 to the time I was 12,
Mhm.
my life was fairly normal. Now, when I say fairly normal, this was normal for me. We were living in the
Right.
projects. We
Mhm.
were living off food stamps.
Mhm.
Many days were filled with grilled cheese sandwiches,
Mhm.
from the actual like block cheese that I don't know if they do that anymore. Do they deliver the big
Government cheese.
government cheese, like the big block cheese? By the way, I still love grilled cheese sandwiches, but not from government cheese.
Grilled
But
cheese sandwiches are great.
yes, but that was my life, and so
Mhm.
I didn't really know. Like I was in the projects. I didn't have a lot, but it worked because I will give my I'll call her my surrogate stepmother. I give her lots of credit because she tried her best to make
Mhm.
me feel like I was wanted.
Right.
And I had I had a few things that happened when I was a kid that were luxuries, even though I was living in the projects. But by all means, you know, it was not, you know, it wasn't glamorous.
What
Okay.
was school like for
Well, that
you
was the interesting
until
part
that?
because when I went to school, I felt that I was different and I didn't know why. There
Mhm.
was something that I always felt like, why do people treat me differently? What's going on? There's something here. Because they probably knew what I didn't know, and people responded to me differently. And
Mhm.
this is something that I tell people now that are in the system, with children, right? Be careful how you treat them because they can feel if you treat them like
Yep.
they're not wanted, or you treat them like they're the bad kid, or they're the foster kid, or they're the orphan. Be
Right.
very careful because they can sense that, because I sensed that in school, because sometimes the teachers were really nice, and then other times they were mean, and if I did something wrong, they would punish me more than if another kid more, because I think they felt that, oh, well, she's a problem child because, she's a unwanted child, or,
And they might
whatever.
feel that they need to be more disciplined with you than
Exactly. And I
right.
always felt that, and I didn't understand that until later in life.
Mhm.
But that was the start. That was
And
how
so
I
and
started.
so then what happened at 12?
So basically at 12, unfortunately, her name was Emma. Emma had a seizure one night. And she literally, like, her body just went into some kind of shock. And I'll never forget when this happened. She was shaking and her whole body was like trembling from head to toe. And she said, "I'm having a seizure." So we had to call 911. And then she was literally, wheeled off, and that was the last time I saw her. And through that incident, a series of events occurred that ended up putting me with my biological mother. And
Now,
that's
where was your biological father at this time?
well, my biological father, that was the sort of that's like the movie version of the story.
Mhm.
My biological father, again, he was never around. He was always, in and out of my life.
Uh-huh.
And his family basically decided that they needed to intervene and try to find my biological mother. And they thought it was time to intervene and locate my biological mother, because they didn't want to know. They made that decision to no longer carry the lie, I guess. Literally, this is how it happened. I was with my uncle, my father's brother, and he said, I want to talk to you. And I'm 12 at the time. I was 12. And he said, I have some news for you. And I said, I know Emma's not my mother. And I have no idea how all of a sudden I figured that out. But, instinctively, I guess I
Mhm.
figured it out. And he said, well, I have news for you. On Saturday, you're going to meet your mother. And I thought, what? You're going to meet your mother
Wow.
on Saturday. So I met my mother, my biological mother, on Saturday. And then I think Sunday, I was on a flight back to California with her. And
What was
that
going
was,
through your head at this moment? I mean, you're 12, you're now the whole life that you had known up until this point had just completely gotten uprooted. You're told
yeah,
you have a different mom, and a week later, you're not even a week later, you're pretty much on a flight to go and live with this person that you don't even really know or didn't know existed. What was happening in your mind?
I don't know. I really don't know. When I think about it, I think I was going through the motion, because I've always had a belief in
Mhm.
something bigger. And I was a dreamer back then. That's one of the things that I loved about my life in the projects. Because even though I was, in that poverty set
Mhm.
environment, there was still something in me that made me dream. And
Mhm.
so I carry that. And
Right.
when I arrived in California, the first thing that she did was put me in a Catholic school. And that was comfort, because I had already been in Catholic school, and I thought, okay, well, I'm going to go into a new school. And luckily, I made some great friends immediately. And I was able to start a new life at 12. So things were fine. I was going to school, I had great friends. And then it was evident that we were going to have some problems, because we were not getting along. And I can say this, both of my parents are no longer on this earth. And so I like to say this with respect, because I do I want to make sure that I respect them, because they did bring me into the world. But I just don't think she was fit to be a mother.
Mhm.
And she didn't act like a mother, because I had been with a woman who was not my biological mother. And that woman made sacrifices for me. That woman never, once told me that I wasn't her child. That woman, she did amazing things. She dealt with, a man dumping a kid off on her doorstep. I mean, she was the embodiment of unconditional love. And then when I was with my biological mother, I didn't feel loved. I didn't feel that she cared. I didn't feel that she wanted me around. And that's why I went to school one day, and the police showed up and said, we're taking you to the shelter because your mother's been reported for child abuse.
Was she physically was it physical
It
abuse?
was more, I think, emotional. There were some things that she was doing that I still don't know to this day who reported
Okay.
her. but there were things that other people saw that they didn't think they were right, and they just picked up the phone one day, called child welfare services and said, we have a situation. They investigated the situation, and then they came to school and they picked me up, put me in a police car, and drove me to the San Jose or Santa Clara County. It was in San Jose, California, Santa Clara County Children's Shelter. And that's sort of how that the next stage of my life began.
And what was that like? I mean, because I'm imagining that, I'm not imagining, I know that happens to a lot of young girls today. It's important that you are taken out of that situation. However, I can't even imagine what it's like to take that ride in a police car to go to a shelter with a group of girls that you don't know, who are probably in survival mode at that point. Everybody is. And then you walk in and you're like, what is going to happen to me? What was going through your head?
Well, I mean, I can remember this like vividly, like it was yesterday.
Huh?
And I remember walking in, and they register you or whatever they do in the office, and then you go into a room that looks like camp, but it's a room filled with beds and a locker, and that's where you sleep with the other girls. And you go to school, like they have school at the shelter where you'll go to school during the day. Go to class, I should say.
Right.
And during that time when I was in the shelter for several months. And so that was during the shelter, I was going through sort of the child welfare services, the court system. I was assigned a social worker, a probation officer. I had to go to court. There was a situation where I went to court with my mother, biological mother. And at that time, they were trying to decide if I would be returned to the home or I would stay a ward of the state. And at the time, this is really interesting. I didn't want to go back.
You didn't want
to go back. I know that's when I tell the story, people go, why wouldn't you want to go back to your mom when you have, they were going to send you back to your biological mother, but you were living in a shelter and you were about to go into the foster care system. Why would you want that? Now, remember, by that time, I was 14, 15. So I started to have sort of my, somewhat of my existence, right? My self-image, sort of forming like the woman I'm going to become. So there was just part of me that felt that I don't think that that's the best place for me in terms of what I want to do with my life. So the probation officer said, no, I want you to go back to your biological mother. I don't want to break up a Black home. I can't do this. And I said, okay. I told my social worker I didn't want to go back. So we go to court. And I kid you not, something happened at court. Can't remember what my mother did or didn't do, but they all convened with the judge, the probation officer, the social worker, and the next thing you know, they said you're gonna go into a group home and you are gonna be in the system until you're 18 years old, and that was that. Done.
And you don't know what it was that your mom did specifically?
I have no idea, because they wanted her to go to counseling. They wanted, she had her own meetings with them. They were obviously meeting with me. I had a social worker, and they were meeting with her. But something happened, and they said, okay.
Well, and I don't think it's necessarily all that far-fetched for you to have not wanted to go back with your mom, because it all, depending on the scenario and the situation and what your mom was doing, which I can
Or
imagine,
not doing.
or not doing, um, which, I can imagine at that point, why would you want to, if you wanted to have some sort of a respectable future and not put yourself in that situation, if you felt that the foster care system was better than your mom, going back to your mom, then there's a really good reason for that. Um, what was
It
it?
was a risk. It was a risk.
Sure, because you also didn't
I
know
had no idea. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. 14, 15. I had no idea. I had no idea.
I mean, that's
But
just incredible as a 14, 15-year-old to have to make that choice. Like, I think about my niece right now, and she's 13, and I, making that choice at that point in your life when you're supposed to be a teen going to school. And I mean, but that's the reality for so many children right now. What were the kids like in the group home when you were there? What was the school like?
well, that was the interesting part. And this is why I have become an advocate for foster kids, unwanted children, parentless, hashtag parentless children, because these kids are amazing. Some of them were molested by their fathers. Some of them were abused by their mothers. Some of them, were in a drug, ridden household. Some of them were physically abused. Some of them lost a parent, like, the parent died, and the next of kin were unable to care for them. I mean, there was so many situations, but they were fairly good girls, because obviously I was, on the girls' side. They were good girls. I mean, really good girls. I mean, now there were some of them that were serial runaways because they had been in the system for so
Right.
long that they were living on the street. They would get arrested. When I say arrested, meaning they would pick them up, bring them back to the shelter, and then they'd run away again.
Right.
So I met a lot of runaways. But these were hardcore young girls that were used to living on the street, and they were used to, hitchhiking and living with different people. I mean, that was their life because they had been in the system for so long that they adapted to that way of living. I've seen it all, when it comes to these children that are put in the system. I mean, I've seen it all. That's why when I speak about this, I have a level of conviction because I was there. I'm not just speaking like, oh, this is the new, topic to talk about, and it's so sexy right now. No, this was real. I was there. I was living in the shelter, living in the children's shelter with runaways, with kids that were sexually abused, with kids that were literal girls that would leave and not come back. And unfortunately, we were told that ended up in human trafficking. I mean, we're talking some serious stuff. Serious stuff.
Yeah. And so, looking at it all now, because we know that it's still a serious issue, especially human trafficking, is a serious issue. And a lot of people think, oh, that doesn't happen here in the United States. Well, yes, it does happen. Very much so. Like, you might think, oh, well, in the Dominican Republic, that can easily happen. Well, guess what? It happens. I mean, we've seen that a lot. And unfortunately, what do you think is lacking, or a step towards a better system or solution? Because I'm not necessarily one to judge a system saying, oh, it doesn't work, without trying to make a certain idea as to what is a step that can be taken to kind of help it. What do you feel is something that can be done better within the system to make it safer?
Well, I think number one is society needs to accept that we have that these children exist,
Right.
and not put us in a box
Mhm.
and
It's
label
not your
us,
fault. You
you
didn't choose
know,
that.
with this sort of stigma
Mhm,
that we're problem children,
mhm,
we're unwanted children. There's something wrong with us. Because talking about human trafficking, 60% of children that are sold on the black market are foster kids.
mhm.
And people often ask, well, how can this happen? Because these are children that, number one, no one wants, number two, no one is looking for.
Right.
So it could have happened to me. Like I literally could have, when the van drove up, I could have hopped into the van. It was the real scenario for me.
Right.
And then they would have said, oh, she ran away.
Mhm.
Cross her name off the list. She's a runaway. Next.
Exactly, because imagine how many times some of the girls that had been repeat runaways and then they
Exactly.
found them and came back, and then all of a sudden one time they ran away, but this time it wasn't that they ran away and were on their own. They ran away and they ended up getting picked up by the wrong people. And
They don't
so,
come back.
yeah. So, I guess that's awareness is definitely, and it's true. Children, the thing is, children don't choose this life.
No, no.
And I think that that's one of the key and most important things that will end this part with is that you don't get to make the choice, and people need to stop with the already preconditioned idea and notion that these are bad kids,
Exactly.
because they're not. Every child, just like every adult, can they may have done some bad or made some bad choices due to their circumstances in the past, but that doesn't mean that they're just bad forever. And I think that that's really really key and really the important part in trying to understand the children and what they've gone through, as opposed to just saying giving up on them. And I think
Exactly. Because here's the deal. And this is the way that society ends up, or the children become a burden.
mhm,
Because when you have kids that are aged out of the system, like myself, and you go out into the system and you have zero support, here are your options: incarceration,
mhm.
drug abuse, mothers on welfare, sold onto the black market, into human trafficking, homelessness,
Right,
lack of education. So now you become a burden to society,
right,
because when you were a child, they didn't want to deal with you.
right,
You were a problem. They just wanted to shuffle you through the system to 18 and dump you on the street.
right.
And
And so,
that's the missing piece that people don't see.
right. And it's true. And that's the thing, where is if they, because people nowadays, instead of being proactive, we are a reactive society. So instead of trying to change that scenario before it gets to that point, people are just like, oh, let's not worry, it's okay, they'll be fine, they'll be fine. And then before you know it, you have chaos on your hand. And so what was it for you, though? Because you did not become a statistic or one of the statistics that they say is going to happen to you. You made it. And you aged out of the foster care system. You were said, here you go, have a nice day. Thank you for your time, so to speak. That's kind of cold, but I
But
mean, and
true.
then, and you were said, okay, and now you're on your own. How'd you do it?
Well, I wanted to piggyback on something you said, because this
Mm-hmm.
is sort of my anthem.
Mm-hmm.
Try living your life without a mother or a father, and then talk to me.
Right.
Because statistically speaking, people like me don't make it.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been homeless, I've been jobless, carless, cashless,
Mm-hmm.
and I think you figured out by now I've been parentless.
Right.
And
I think right now is a really key point for kids, young adults, adolescents out there that are like, that are going through the same thing that you went through and thinking that they can't do it, like they need to really hone in and listen now, because this is the lesson right here.
I had a desire to do something with my life.
Mm-hmm.
And I was a dreamer, and I would dream about, the things that I'm doing today. I would dream about. And that is what gave me that level of conviction to get a job. So I started working when I was 15 years old because I knew, okay, I was in a group home. I was in the foster care system. I didn't have any money, okay? I knew that I needed to have a job to make money, to buy things for myself. So I already had that desire to make something of myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I put myself in situations where I developed my life skills. I developed my communication skills, sales skills, networking skills, literally out of survival, because I had to survive. I needed a job. I needed a place to live. I needed to buy food to eat. I needed to buy a bus pass so I could actually get on the bus. I mean, like the day that my foster parent said to me, it's time to go, I didn't have a car. I just had some clothes and some toiletries. And luckily a friend, drove me to someone else's house, and I rented a room. And I rented a room in the neighborhood that was close enough so that I could take the bus to work at Macy's. So that's how I started. And then I had these other dreams, and I said, okay, I want to go to Hollywood.
Mm-hmm.
And before Hollywood, I went to San Francisco to pursue modeling and did some, fashion shows and got an agent and did a little bit of work. But there was a time where I just wanted to go to Hollywood.
Mm-hmm.
And I found a way to get to Hollywood. I had less than $1,000 to my name, and I made it to Hollywood. Slept on the sofa, but I made it to Hollywood.
Let's talk about that beginning. You get to Hollywood, you're sleeping on someone's sofa. And what would you do? You get up in the morning and you'd say, okay, I'm going to go and do this audition. What was it then that you started doing to get yourself to that next level?
I mean, this was sort of that, I guess I got my big break, because after going through everything, I get to Hollywood, and I kid you not, like days, we're talking days, I end up at a casting call. Oh. And so I'm at a casting call because my network was already networking. Mm-hmm. And I ended up at a casting for Central Casting in Burbank, California. I ended up at a casting, and they picked me out of hundreds of people, and they picked me. I said, we want you to register for this casting, and you can do some extra work. And that was how I started, just like that. And then before you know it, I had, casting calls, and people were asking, not people, I say casting agents were calling me and saying, oh, we want you for this bit part in a Warner Brothers TV show. And at the time I was non-union because I didn't have enough credits to be a union performer. But within about, I want to say 60 to 90 days, I was a Screen Actors Guild member because they'd given me so much work that I qualified to be SAG, and I got my Screen Actors Guild card, and I was on my way.
Now, what was your very first job? What was the very first?
Oh, gosh. Okay, I think, if I'm not mistaken, because I did a lot of TV, but I think my sort of my arrival, like, oh my gosh, this is working. I was a dancer in the movie Boogie Nights.
Oh my God, really? Yes. Now I gotta watch it again. I mean, I've watched it.
I met, and this is so funny. I'll never forget this. I was hanging out with Marky Mark. So cool, so cool. Hanging out with Marky Mark. And I just remember thinking, oh my gosh, okay, I think I got it. I think I did it, that was sort of, the first thing that I can remember, because I was working so much, because I literally would get these little parts and sort of like the ingenue, and people were calling me. I mean, I auditioned, I'll tell you something funny. I auditioned to be the black girl on Baywatch. It's like, when they were like, okay, we want to put more black girls on Baywatch. And so I was literally, called to go down in Santa Monica.
Did they make you run on the beach?
No, I didn't make it that far.
I wasn't sure.
I went to the preliminaries, and I went to the casting, but I didn't make it to the part where you had to. I think there's a audition for swimmers, because at the time I wasn't a swimmer. But I said, I'm going to go out for this beach show, even though I'm not an expert swimmer. I'll figure it out. But I literally, I did so much. I'll tell you another funny part was I actually was in the commercial, the Reebok commercial with Cuba Gooding Jr. for a very well-known movie called Jerry Maguire.
Oh my God.
And I was dancing with Cuba Gooding Jr. So I had fun. It was talk about, just like a revelation after everything that I had been through. I started to have that, what at that time, what I call success. Now, Hollywood standards, it wasn't success, because I wasn't like.
Remember where you came from. And the problem is people want to get here without going here, 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 and here.
Exactly.
And so really you are little by little, because you were Janet Jackson's body double.
Yes.
You worked with LL Cool J. You were in the Black Eyed Peas video.
Yep.
And all of these wonderful, you were in Homegrown with John Bon Jovi and Billy Bob Thornton. But I want to get to the story that you told me the first time we had this interview, because this is the big one, because like you even said, is the one where not everybody gets to work with Steven Spielberg.
Yes. Thank you. Yes.
You were in Amistad.
Yes.
So tell us about that part, because he asked you personally to do this. And so take us back to the ship.
Back to the ship, yes. So there's actually two scenes. So there was the scene at Universal Studios in Hollywood. So we the inside of the ship, we actually shot on a sound stage, and then the external scenes were shot in Long Beach on a ship. But this particular day, history-making scene. It's a history-making scene. I haven't seen it in a very long time, but basically, we're on a ship, and we're slaves. We are the slaves. And I remember when the casting agent called me and said, "Do you want to do this? You're gonna have to like go in the buff, like everything, no, your hair, like no extensions, like no makeup, like you have to go raw, and you'll be given an opportunity to speak, but you have to learn this dialect. So then we'll take you to a voice coach and train you to speak this dialect." So I go to train. They give me the part. I say, "Yes, I will do it. I will do it. I will do it." Because I thought, okay, this is cool. I'll do it. So I go to the voice coach, and I couldn't get it. I couldn't get the dialect. So they said, "Look, we still want you to do the movie," because a lot of people didn't want to do it, number one. And it was a very heart-wrenching scene, because we were given the opportunity to either use fake chains or real chains. Mm-hmm. And that's when it became real. Like, this is real. This is not like it's a movie, but this really happened. And I chose fake chains. I still have the chains, actually. I chose fake chains because I just didn't want to. I didn't need to have real chains. So I chose fake chains. And so we're on the boat, lying down, chained, and Steven Spielberg on set, roll camera, tape, action. I can't remember at the time if it was Jaimin, I can't remember if he was on set at the time, but they were doing, different scenes with other actors. And all of a sudden, he said, look, I need you to take some food off the face of another person, and I need you to eat it. And I thought, whoa. And I was in shock, okay? Because number one, it's Steven Spielberg.
Right.
Number two, I'm in the buff. I'm not wearing anything, so I'm a little self-conscious. Oh my gosh. This is crazy.
And you're in chains.
Yes.
And he wants.
And he said, imagine if you're on a boat and you haven't had anything to eat and they're throwing food at you. Like they're just throwing food out. And you haven't had anything to eat. What would you do? And you saw a little bit of food on someone else's face. Wouldn't you just go out and grab it and eat it? And so I take a deep breath and I didn't say anything. And Steven Spielberg said, did you hear me? And everyone was silent on the set.
Oh my God.
My heart's beating. I'm like, oh gosh. Yes, yes, yes. I heard you. Yes, yes, yes. And I did it. And if you see the movie, Mr. Spielberg kept my shot in the movie.
Oh my God. Wow. Wow.
That was it. So yeah, that's a big moment in Hollywood. I would say that's probably one of the biggest moments, because all of that momentum, auditioning for Baywatch and ended up in the music video and on, the TV show when I worked with LL Cool J on his TV show, and working with Bon Jovi and Billy Bob Thornton, at Homegrown, and, all of that led to that. So there were 4 core skills that I learned through my journey of struggle, my journey of defeat, my journey of poverty. There were 4 skills. And number 1 was selling. I had to learn how to sell myself, and I didn't even know it.
Mm-hmm.
I had to learn how to communicate. I've never gone to college, and I work at a very advanced level in business,
Mm-hmm.
but that's only through self-education and study.
Mm-hmm.
So communication, networking, and leadership,
Mm-hmm.
because I've had to lead people in many situations. We didn't touch on this today, but when I worked in beauty and fashion, I was a leader and putting together teams for different retail stores, and also doing beauty shows and fashion shows and things like that. So I have those skills, but they were skills that I learned along the way. Mm-hmm. And I find that today, so many people, go out and say, they're an expert, because it's so easy to say I'm a coach or I'm an expert. And it's become quite a commodity. And I tell people that I'm not perfect, obviously, right? Okay, my imperfections, my idiosyncrasies, I wear that. I own it. But I have mastered these skills along the way through trial and error. I have no shame around, people will say, oh, well, you've made money and you've lost money and you've done all these things. And, who are you? Who am I not to do this?
Right. Because
what better example than someone who literally fell on her cute, and had to get up and make something. Mm-hmm. And like I said, my theme, try living your life without a mother or a father, and then talk to Ungenita Prevost. Let that sink in. That's for everyone to hear, before the judgment, before the stereotypes, before the assumptions. What would you do if
Right.
you didn't have a mother or a father?